Hello, faculty and staff here with us today and those following along virtually. Welcome to the Culturally Responsive Teaching Virtual Professional Development for Pre-K through 12 teachers. My name is Caitlin Ruggiero, and today I will be introducing a significant problem surrounding the education of English language learners, otherwise known as ELs, and I will be providing research-based best practice strategies to help solve that problem. So attached and displayed is the outline for our presentation, and ideally this presentation could be split into 2 different sessions, allowing for reflection time amongst teachers. However, since this presentation is virtual and there are many uncertainties about returning physically to school this fall, this presentation can be completed in 1 session at your own pacing via online. You will see that first we will be identifying the problem and briefly going over why it's a problem and why the problem matters. Then the bulk of this presentation provides solutions, research-based findings to support those solutions, and then how to implement these solutions to solve the problem. So a big part of this is what can you do today to start implementing these things into your classroom. In addition to the Google slideshow video presentation, there's a teacher toolbox handout, and you have that because it has different resources for you and templates and graphic organizers and rubrics to utilize that follow all of these best practice research-based findings. So when you walk away from this presentation, you will have the Google Doc with all of those different resources to begin implementing in your room right away. So hopefully this professional development session is valuable to you because you will walk away with different things and solutions to try to help alleviate the problem that will be discussed. Then we will end with an exit ticket, and that's it. So let's go ahead and get started. So the problem is there is a lack of integration of culture and instruction for English language learners. And this professional development presentation seeks to resolve that problem. So everything we're doing is trying to solve this problem for our English language learners. So why is a lack of integration of culture and instruction a problem for ELs? There are 3 main reasons, which include teacher preparation, teacher beliefs, and teacher misconceptions toward linguistic and cultural differences amongst students. For example, Boyce and Chouinard's 2017 case study of students in a graduate level teacher preparation course resulted in students highlighting their ability to understand cultural responsiveness, but also admitting their inability to put those strategies into practice. In addition, Smith's and Jansen-Willen's 2020 13-month case study confirms that teachers in the educator preparation program share mutual unpreparedness and lack of knowledge of diversity and differentiation for English language learners. In Mellum's 2018 qualitative study with 147 teachers in the southern United States, the participating teachers were given sets of questions about working with ELs. And the educators that took part in the study overwhelmingly had a deficit view towards ELs. In addition, Murphy and Torf 2019 conclude that a majority of teachers believe they should teach ELs using less rigorous materials than their English-speaking classmates. Also, Rizzuto 2017 concludes that a majority of teachers do not allow or strongly discourage ELs to speak their L1 in the school setting. So, as you can see from these various studies, teacher beliefs and misconceptions towards linguistic and culturally diverse students play a big role in this problem. But now you might be wondering, so how does this apply to my classroom? Maybe you only have 1 or 2 ELs. Maybe you don't think you do these things. Maybe you don't realize it. Well, the reality is that the number of English language learners nationwide are on the rise. According to the Department of Education's National Center for Education Statistics from 2020, there are approximately 5 million English language learners in public schools nationwide. It's our responsibility to learn how to provide an equitable education for them while also embracing and integrating their linguistic and cultural differences. According to Hutchison and McAllister Shields 2020, ELs must be able to see themselves in what they're learning, find value in the content, and relate to what they're learning. I have conducted significant research to discover and provide solutions to the lack of integration of culture in instruction, and I will present the findings to you in relevance and respect to the literature reviewed. Beginning the process of integrating culture in instruction begins with learning about and implementing the culturally responsive teaching strategies established by Gay 2013. CRT is, quote, using the cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of references, and performance styles of ethnically diverse students to make learning encounters more relevant and effective for them. So, according to Gay, there are 4 components of implementing CRT into your classroom. The 4 main components or pillars of Gay's culturally responsive teaching strategies are 1, caring, 2, communication, 3, curriculum, and 4, instruction. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, I care about my students, I talk to them, I have a curriculum that I use, and obviously I'm instructing my students. So what else should I be doing? Well, I will show you what properly implemented CRT looks like in classrooms. As we just discussed on the previous slide, the first pillar of CRT is caring. We must continuously exemplify to our ELs that we have a deep passion to make them feel loved and cared for. So we must show them through our teaching that we have a vested interest in them and their success. As educators, we have to continuously expect a lot from our ELs without making an assumption about their academic ability solely based on the fact that they are an EL. According to Gay 2013, educators should use students' personal interest to spark a conversation with students. These can be quick conversations just to make students feel welcomed during class. So these could be in the beginning of class. If you know a student really loves baseball, maybe strike up a conversation about that. That's something that a lot of us are doing. But another thing that we should all be implementing are interest inventories. So interest inventories should be implemented and used by educators in the beginning of the year to learn about their likes, dislikes, and hobbies. So I'm going to show you what the interest inventory looks like. Attached this is what your toolbox handout looks like. And this is your interest inventory. So per Gay's 2013 CRT strategies, this is one of the ways to show that you care for your students by taking a vested interest in them. Now, interest inventories are very handy so that you can get a quick inventory of what students like about school, maybe what they don't like about school, maybe something they're good at, something they need help with. And these sentence stems are just good starters for ELs. Obviously, you can differentiate if they need help writing or expressing their thoughts. But you can get some background information like what they like to watch on TV, what they like to read, just so you can kind of get a better idea of who they are. And these are something you would just hang on to throughout the year. So an example of how the personal interest inventory could be implemented is if a 7th grade English language learner loves to learn about boats and the social studies class is maybe learning about the Erie Canal. So during the beginning of mass transportation and the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s, the teacher could incorporate boats and use the knowledge of his or her students' interest in boats to provide a way for the student to learn more about how boats impacted this period of time in history. So maybe the teacher could provide a student-led discovery project or a choice board project, and that would allow the student to use their personal interest to spark their academic success and really take pride in their work. The interest inventory I created is attached in your toolbox handout. In addition to utilizing an interest inventory, teachers should begin with a genuine discussion. To show that you care about your linguistically diverse students, researchers also suggest modeling your higher order thinking when thinking through a problem or task with students, so they can hear your thought processes. This will help students understand how to replicate the thought process and also exemplifies your desire to help them be successful. Okay, so when you are modeling how to do something, maybe you're modeling how to complete a graphic organizer. Before you let students do that on your own, instead of just showing them how to do it, show them verbally out loud what you're thinking. So you're thinking, maybe that information needs to go in this box. Let's say you're doing a sequencing graphic organizer and you're picking details out of the story. Okay, and it says, and finally the girl got to school and had a great day. Maybe that's the detail you're looking at. And you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to put that detail in the first box. My choices are first, next, then last. Then you look at it and you think to yourself, okay, I just put that detail in the first box. I know that that detail starts with finally. I know that finally means the end. So I'm looking at my work and I'm thinking, is this correct? Nope. Oops, I made a mistake. I'm going to move this detail to the last box. I know that finally means end, and I'm putting things in order. I'm sequencing them. Okay, I'm rereading it. Now this makes sense. That's an example of a mini think aloud. So when you're doing a think aloud, that exemplifies to students how they should be talking to themselves when working through problems. So interest inventories and think alouds are very important for helping utilize this component of CRT. Now we're going to go back and we are going to talk about the second component. The second component is communication. As educators working with ELs, we must be aware of the communicative differences that our languages and cultures may have. To help make ELs feel comfortable and be successful in your classroom, researchers suggest recognizing the discourse modes you prefer and recognizing those of your students. Ideally, we should seek to blend those to find common ground. For example, ELs may have ways of communicating including gestures, motions, symbols, or different meanings for those symbols. Depending on their culture and their L1, these gestures may or may not be similar to the ones that we're used to. Seek to find what those gestures mean and incorporate them in the classroom as best you can. Also, ELs might have different social norms that you might not be familiar with, so take time to learn about their culture. For example, during my first year as an ENL teacher, I had a second grade boy from Somalia who refused to look at me and make eye contact. At first, I got frustrated because he'd essentially shut down and refused to communicate. Instead of pushing the issue, because it frustrated both of us, I did a lot of research and digging and consulted with some experts and realized that making eye contact is frowned upon in their culture and is a sign of disrespect. So I reevaluated the situation and determined that the boy in fact was not being rude to me. Instead, he had different ways of communicating and showing respect than I was used to. Once I realized that, we both felt much more comfortable communicating with each other, and I was a more effective educator for him. When working with newcomers, Gay and Bonner suggest utilizing some sort of picture board to help ELs non-verbally communicate their needs. In the teacher toolbox handout, I've attached a picture board for you to print and utilize in your classrooms immediately to help your L's feel more comfortable. This helps L's feel comfortable because they don't feel the pressure associated with finding the right words to express their basic needs. Once again, I'm shifting over to the handout, and this is the picture board. So if you hang this in your room, this is a way for newcomers to communicate with you of their basic needs without having to find the words and the language to convey their needs. So this is another student-friendly way of having open lines of communication for your L's. Okay, now we are going to move on to the third pillar. The third pillar of GACE, culturally responsive teaching strategies, is curriculum. So when teaching L's, high quality and rigorous instruction is necessary. Educators should never dumb down materials for L's or assume they can't do what the curriculum is asking because they are an L. Ideally, the district should offer diverse, multicultural curriculum that incorporates texts from a variety of authors. If not, petition to your district to update to a more multicultural, diverse textbook series. The ELA and ENL curriculum within our district include texts from a variety of cultures and incorporate bits and pieces from other languages. While waiting to update your curriculum, since this is something that is out of our hands and can take longer than we would hope, something you can do today is talk to your librarian. On your teacher toolbox handout, there is a list of 15 books to consider adding to your classroom library. I'm not asking you to go out and buy all of these books with your own money because that's crazy. But I am asking you to reach out to your school librarian or the library in your city and ask for help finding these and start to borrow them a few at a time to share with students in your own classroom. In my own experience as an ENL teacher, I had a third grade student almost in tears when she rummaged through my library to find a book with a girl wearing a hijab on the front cover. It's very evident through research and through our own experiences that students just want to see themselves represented in the curriculum they're learning and the books they're reading. So these are small steps to help us integrate culture into our instruction. And the fourth component of CRT is instruction. When working with L's, careful consideration must be given to accommodate their needs, and we must provide necessary scaffolding and differentiation. According to Bonner and Gay, L's work best in student-centered learning activities. One way to ensure L's are actively engaged and on task is to give each group member a job to do. See the teacher toolbox handout for a template of cooperative learning activity roles. So here are the activity roles. These jobs can be easily modified to fit the needs of any cooperative learning activity, and they give L's specific expectations of what they need to be doing throughout the job. So these jobs include facilitator, recorder, timekeeper, and mediator. So students will see if you were to use these exact ones, students would know that if they're the facilitator, their job is to read the directions, check for understanding, and keep the group members on task. And their job is also to connect with the teacher if they have a question. So that student, the L, they know what their job is. And this is not just helpful for L's, this is just good teaching. Every student, regardless of their native language, needs to be kept on task. So by utilizing these task role cards, L's will feel more comfortable interacting because they're not trying to figure out what they should be doing. They are just making sure they're doing their job and they are focused on doing their job. So these cards can easily be adjusted if you're doing a science project and maybe you need somebody to go grab materials, or you need somebody to be more of the cleanup and regroup person. You can easily change these. And then in addition to utilizing these roll cards, total participation techniques should be used with students. So using popsicle sticks, not to get a cold call to be like, haha, I got you, you weren't paying attention. This is just to keep kids on task. I use popsicle sticks in my room. Kids don't feel threatened, but they do know that they're accountable for listening to what's going on. And if they don't understand, if your popsicle stick gets pulled, just say, I need help, I don't understand. It's as easy as that. But by using the popsicle sticks, it keeps everybody engaged. Everybody knows that they might be up next. And it's really not, it's not an anxious thing for them. They just know that they're being held accountable. If they know the answer or want to share something, that's great. If they need some additional help, that's also perfectly fine too. You should also use, if you have them available, mini dry erase boards. If you're doing some grammar practice, maybe you're a math teacher, maybe you're checking vocab, maybe you're doing science and you want to check some vocab. Ask a question, have students write it down, and then I always say chin me, and they quick hold up their dry erase boards so that they're all holding it up at once and they can't change their answer. So you know if they truly know that material or not. Then think, pair, shares, and turn and talks are great ways just to keep everybody engaged, everybody on task. And then in addition to those techniques, it's important to help ELs develop positive school and work habits, like going to bed early, eating breakfast at home or school, paying attention, and then asking for help when needed. So these are important instructional routines for students to get used to getting into. And these tips will help ELs be most successful. When teaching, it's important to be aware of the trauma that ELs may have endured and recognize that there may be sensitive material for them to learn about, especially as content develops as students progress through high school. So just be aware that some students have endured a lot of trauma, and what you're talking to them about might be something very sensitive for them. Finally, include ELs in the teaching process when learning about something they are familiar with. If students come from the country or have experienced what you're learning, give them an opportunity to give a firsthand account of that experience, since most of our ELs have lived through things we can't even fathom. In my experience, one of my second grade students had come from Rwanda, and in Rwanda, they did not have running water, and they had to go down to the river or the creek to scoop up buckets of water so that they could drink their water and cook with it. And we were reading a book in our textbook, and it was about pumps and how they use pumps in Africa to get water. And she was able to relate to the picture because she saw kids scooping up water from a river, and she was able to tell us what it was really like. So at that moment, I decided to stop, and I let her kind of guide the conversation, and she was able to give a lot better firsthand account of what it was really like experiencing that. And I think that when we have those moments with our ELs, we really just need to appreciate their experiences and let them share those with other students, because she did a much better job explaining what life was like in Rwanda with the water than I did. So now we've reviewed the 4 pillars of CRT. But in addition to GAZE frameworks, there are some additional strategies to utilize. And one of these strategies are instructional conversations. So one way to continue to engage our ELs is by implementing instructional conversations. And these are teacher-facilitated conversations that last approximately 20 minutes. So they have a clear objective, and they require the teacher to provide language frames and stems for ELs to participate. So everybody participates, and students take turns regulating the speaking turns, and the teacher does not lead the conversation. So the teacher starts the conversation, and then the teacher kind of backs out when students are ready to continue it on their own. So when the students are talking, this is really prime time for teachers to start listening carefully for speaking and listening skills and comprehension. If you're looking for a specific skill, now would be a really good time to get out your clipboard and start tracking who's doing what and what you're hearing and seeing. Instructional conversations can help ELs feel comfortable with other students because there is a specific topic in question that has to be discussed. And then they have the language and sentence frames to help them effectively share their ideas. So I'm going to shift over to the toolbox. I attached some language frames for you to utilize with your students. Some of them are just the starters. Some of them are actual frames, and then some of them are the beginning of a question. So do you agree with blank? I think this represents blank. Just by printing these out and having them on the table, maybe laminate them so students could even take a dry erase marker and write on them if they need to take notes before they say something. These are just good tools, and if they're used universally in classrooms, then by the time students hit the middle elementary grades, they will already know these, they will have practiced these, and they might not even need these charts. So frames are a perfect way to help students engage in instructional conversations. So here's an example of a potential instructional conversation if you wanted to know what it looked like. So let's say we're working with grade 3 ELs. So first you would read an article with ELs about the pros and cons of maybe starting school at noon. So use some popsicle sticks to cold call to ask students just to share what they think the pros are of starting school at noon. And then maybe have students break down the con of the school starting at noon and put it on a post-it note. So then students will be using a T-chart. So if they've never used a T-chart, maybe just model that quickly, but by 3rd grade, most should know how to do that. And then depending on the number of students, break them into groups of 5 or 6 and lead the discussion by saying why or why not should school start at 12 p.m. instead of 8 a.m. So when students begin, you do not add to the conversation. You give ELs 20 minutes to talk amongst themselves and complete the T-chart, pros versus cons, and by the end, they must have one unanimous opinion. So why are we using these? Teacher-facilitated conversations are when students must work together to decide how they will work together, and they work towards one common goal of finding one unanimous evidence-based opinion. So students are gaining a lot from these conversations, especially if they're implemented even just once a week. They're practicing their reasoning skills, they're practicing their social skills and how to get along with people that they might not disagree with. They are practicing how to compare and contrast, whether they do that on paper with a T-chart or even just verbally. They're talking about how things are the same and different and good and bad, pros and cons, and they're working with others. So various studies have been done to show that these are beneficial, and Portis et al. 2018 and Mellon 2018 both confirmed in their studies that instructional conversations are very effective for working with ELs. They are very beneficial to ELs. According to researchers, the inclusion of online programs in public schools and universities has continued to grow since 2015. So due to the recent pandemic, in-person traditional instruction abruptly shifted to online literally overnight. We had to figure out what we were doing online in a matter of days. If not, some of us just had the weekend. So as the 2020-2021 school year approaches, we know there are many uncertainties as to what teaching will look like this year. To help lessen the stress associated with providing online instruction for ELs and to continue to integrate culture and instruction for ELs, there are numerous online teaching CRT strategies to implement. Create relationships and rapport with students online by assessing ELs' comfort levels with technology in the beginning of the course. For example, you could write on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you utilizing Zoom? How comfortable are you utilizing Google Forms? How comfortable are you turning in a document on Google Classroom? Then you could tell them, tell me about your background using blank. Maybe some students had a teacher that used Google Meet. Maybe you're used to Zoom. So you have to figure out what they're used to, what you're used to, and find a way to mesh those together. So it's important to engage ELs in discussion. Just like we would in person, we need to keep doing that online. In the beginning, utilize discussions to introduce students. Ask specific questions that require an answer beyond a yes or no. Use responses to gauge the writing and academic technology struggles Els might be having. So I'm going to shift once again. So these are some questions that researchers provided that are best practice for when you're first starting an online discussion in an online class. Even if it's January and you have to shift to online, it's important to get students feeling comfortable online. Even if you know all of these things, it's just to help them practice typing a response, checking the discussion, adding on to a conversation, and getting them used to it. So another CRT for online instruction is that students perform better when they are able to see you. So figure out a platform that works for everybody and set expectations for how you'll use those platforms. Okay, so I created kind of like just expectations. I don't want to say rules, but I created some expectations. There are 4 of them for students to utilize during online meetings to help them stay motivated, on track. So I'm going to shift over once again. So these are the online expectations. Now you can have these in your room if you use computers, or you can post these online, but I would get students used to something to this effect. It doesn't have to be exactly, because everybody's got some different needs depending on what they teach and their group of students. But the first is to respect the speaker and listen to others. This was kind of a problem in my classroom until I established this when we were doing Zoom meetings. Some kids were just trying to talk all over each other, and it just doesn't work. So researchers say that it's best to set these rules to help alleviate that. Have an adult present during the meeting. Be on time to meeting. It's just like class. And then keep your device safe. So a lot of schools are lending out technology to students, which is great, but it's students' responsibility to keep that technology safe, like keeping it flat on a surface. Okay, next. When students have to demonstrate some content knowledge or maybe a language skill, give them an opportunity to choose a summative task that demonstrates their knowledge. So this is called a choice activity. Options could be maybe a video presentation, a slideshow presentation. Woodley 2017 states that blogs and publishing a YouTube video, a multimedia poster, a brochure, a verbal or written reflection are all things that can help demonstrate knowledge, but they're things that students can take ownership in if they get to choose. So here is an example of a choice board. If you need students to demonstrate that they understand what the Industrial Revolution was like, maybe you have them make a poster, maybe a comic book. If you tell them what they need to show you, by letting them choose the mode of how they do that, they take some ownership in their learning, and they might feel more comfortable showing you what they know. Okay, and now we're gonna jump into what formative assessments should look like. Assessments could be its own presentation all on its own, but just utilizing the CRT strategies, make sure you have clear content and language objectives, differentiate instruction for ELs, modify the length, modify the number of questions, provide additional time, modify the choices on multiple choice, use rubrics, make it not threatening. If you can, have students make a portfolio throughout the year to really get a good picture of what their growth looks like versus just a snapshot assessment every now and then. And then I'm going to hop over to the handout, and I attached a writing rubric for you. This rubric is very handy for assessing L's. You can kind of modify this side as you need it, depending on what students are actually doing, and probably with their grade level might look a little different. But if you have a beginning L, then you're assessing them on this and they get a 1, 2, or 3. If you have an advanced expanding student, what you're assessing them on is a lot different than a beginning L, as it should be. So this rubric modifies your grading for them. It keeps it fair because you are grading them based on their proficiency level. Okay, another important CRT strategy is to get engaged with students' families. Spend time in the community. There are lots of benefits for teachers. You might think that you're just trying to do this to help your students, but in the end, you will probably have a new attitude or perspective shift on your students and their families. So if you can get involved, maybe your church has families who have different backgrounds than you do, or a community center, just find a way to get involved. There are no resources on your handout for that because that's entirely up to you. And what I might do in my community looks a lot different than what somebody might do in another state or even another part of the county. So here's just a table. This is from a study that was done when pre-service teachers had to go into the community as part of one of their classes. And this just reviews some of their perception changes and attitude changes that they went through and things that they learned. So they learned a lot about the family and the relationship. And they learned that the mom didn't enter any programs to learn English because she wanted her children to learn. So she's trying to take care of these children to make sure they learn and they excel. And she had neglected to give herself the time to do that. So this pre-service teacher notices just how tight and bonded this family is. In another study, one pre-service teacher assumed that everybody in the family spoke one language. I believe the mom spoke French and then the dad spoke maybe Spanish and the students spoke Spanish. So the pre-service teacher was meeting with the family and she started talking to them in Spanish because she was bilingual and the mom didn't understand. And then she realized that the mom spoke French. So you can't even assume with L families that they all speak the same language because depending on their circumstances, mom and dad might speak 2 different languages. And then the children, depending on what the parents teach them, they might speak both, they might speak just one. So you can never ever assume the workings of a family, which is why it's so important to get engaged with the family, get to know them, help them feel comfortable, let them know that you're there to advocate for them. And that's when you will really start to integrate culture in your instruction and help L's feel more comfortable and be successful in school. And then this is one of our last slides, and it talks about letting students share stories about their diverse backgrounds. So Bonner did a big study, and it was determined that by celebrating diversity in small ways each day, students feel more comfortable. So let them share stories to feel proud of their heritage. Don't make students feel like their L1 or their heritage and culture is something that should be hidden. I'm going to hop over to the handout. There we go. And you will see 3 boxes in a line. This does not look like much, but when you facilitate the directions and you give it to your students, this will turn into one of the best projects you will do. This is a story strip, and on this top line, you'd have students write where they're from. Some of my students are from Yemen. I'll do that as an example. Then you tell students that your job is to pick a place that you call home. Maybe you call home the town you live in now. Maybe you call home the place you are from. It's also interesting to see what students associate home being. Some students think that the town they live in is their home, which is great. Other students think that Yemen or Somalia or Rwanda is home, which is also great. Students get to choose what home is to them. Then their job is to draw 3 different images in the story strips to show the 3 most important parts of wherever they're from. And this is when it gets really great. Some students draw their families, some draw their churches, some draw different nature scenes. It's really interesting to what students, to see what students draw to illustrate what home is to them. So when students are done, they can label their images or their captions in English or their L1. So I personally use these story strips in one of my 4th grade sections of L's, and when they were done, I hung them around my room, and I thought, okay, great, this is a good activity, that was a good unit opener, and I'll hang them on the walls, and perfect. Well, students became much more aware of where their classmates are from, and when a location was mentioned in whatever text we were reading, students would make the text to world connection that someone in their class was from there, and they had more information on what life was like there. They would point to the story strip, they would ask that student questions, and I just thought, what a great way to get students talking and recognizing each other's differences in a positive way. So this opened the door to students utilizing each other as resources, and it helped them to learn to take pride in their L1 and cultural differences. Okay. So we have spent the last 40 minutes reviewing many culturally responsive teaching strategies to implement, to integrate culture and instruction for our English language learners. Before I leave you, in this slideshow and on your toolbox handout, there is an exit ticket, of course, because all good lessons end with an exit ticket. And my question for you is, what 2 changes will you make in the upcoming school year to implement at least 2 of these strategies in your own classroom, whether that be in person or online? Please email me your responses. You will see the exit ticket on your handout as well. And with that, I will leave you with the references. And if you have any questions about this presentation, if you'd like more information on culturally responsive teaching strategies, please email me at the email listed on the exit ticket slide, and I will be happy to give you more resources or information on integrating culture and instruction for English language learners. Thank you for attending this professional development.